So on a one bedroom or a two bedroom, your net return is probably going to be in that 1,500, 1,800 range. On the larger properties, the five bedroom homes, you're looking closer to 8 to 10,000, especially if it's some of the homes that you can have some of the pool tables or swimming pools. Some of the higher end luxury stuff. You could get closer to 15,000 on a net basis, on a monthly basis on those.
Net.
Mhm.
Holy cannoli. This is episode number 71 of the Short-Term Rental Success Stories podcast. Are you an investor that's looking to have your home professionally managed? Go to cohostit.com for more information. Welcome back to Short-Term Rental Success Stories. I'm your host, Julian Sage. This is a show where I talk to hosts about their journeys in starting and growing their short-term rental business. My goal is that you'll be able to walk away with practical information that'll help you become a better host and learn how to scale your business. Like any exceptional host, we all strive for 5-star reviews, so please go on over to iTunes and let us know what you enjoy, as it really helps support the show. If you haven't done so already, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation, to connect with the community. Hey, what is going on, Host Nation? I'm super excited to be back again with you this week. So for those of you that have been following John and I, we are currently building out about 9 rentals in the Miami, Florida area. These properties are master lease properties that we are able to pick up. So there's been a lot of coordination and juggling coming over and finding new roadblocks and obstacles that we are starting to see. It's been a big learning experience and also part of my first time going through the process of getting properties up and running. Not only is it a process in just furnishing the rentals and getting them, ready to get listed, but then it's another thing also just on the back end when you do have multiple properties that you're building out at the same time, as far as like getting internet set up, utilities set up, getting all of the little nuts and bolts, the things that you don't really think about that often, all of these things lined up, insurance. This all can be a very lengthy and tedious process. So I'm really excited to be able to just grow our management company and acquire these properties. I know that there's a lot of people right now that are listening to this show and worried about, whether they should start investing now or if maybe they should just wait until things cool over. I know for a lot of listeners, they have been following the show for a while now. And maybe they just got started at the beginning of this year, and then COVID happened, and that put a damper on everybody's plans. But that doesn't mean that you can't study and start learning and really getting ready. I mean, it's taken me right now, a year and a half of really just learning and continuing every time that I interview a new person or I, working on our course and coming up with the VRM episodes every week. It's just a constant learning experience, just constantly finding new information, learning, and then being able to show and teach other people just the things that I've learned myself, as well as, relying on my mentor, business partner, and friend, John Bell, to be able to help, streamline and help expedite that process for me. It's one thing to be learning, though. It's another thing to be doing, which is also this learning curve and growing this company and just doing a larger amount of units all at the same time. It is a process. So if you're interested in streamlining your process, our coaching program, the Vacation Rental Machine Formula, for those of you that have been following again for a while now, you know that we released this program about a few months ago around the start of COVID. Perfect timing. We released our coaching program. Now, this coaching program, we've been refining it, working on it all this time, and able to really just help the students in our group. But at this time, we've been able to price it at a really nice early bird price of $1,000, but this program will be increasing very shortly within the next couple weeks. So this upcoming week is going to be the last week that it will be available at our early bird price, and it will literally be doubling in price. So if you've been on the fence about joining John and I for our bi-weekly coaching, as well as just this program that we've put together, taking all of our experience, everything that I've learned, putting it all together with all the tools and things that you need to either build a co-hosting management company or get into rental arbitrage master lease investing. This program is another one of my babies. I've spent a lot of time and effort into this. So being very attention to detailed, I made sure that I had everything that you need to be able to get up and running and be able to operate your business and start to scale. So again, if you've been on the fence about purchasing the Vacation Rental Machine Formula, just know that this upcoming week, this will be the last week that it will be available at our early bird price. At that point, we will be increasing the price at least double the amount. If you like more information on the program, you can go to vacationrentalmachine.com. We'll also be sending out some email reminders just letting you guys know when the deadline is that we will be raising the price. But today I have the special honor of speaking with Rich Munroe, founder of Diamond Edge Properties, a tax lien real estate investment company that has now shifted its focus to primarily short-term rental management and master lease investing in the Atlanta, Georgia area. In this episode, Rich shares his experience of starting his real estate flipping company, how tax lien investing works, why the switch to short-term rental management, and what is the reason Rich's strategy involves acquiring the largest properties in the area to master lease. If you like my show notes in this episode, go to shorttermsage.com/STR71, or if you like my show notes sent directly to your inbox every week, then go to shorttermsage.com/show notes. With all that being said, on to this week's conversation. Hey, welcome back, Host Nation, to another episode of Short-Term Rental Success Stories. In this episode, I have the special honor of speaking with Rich Munroe. Rich, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the Host Nation and let them know who you are and what inspired you to get into short-term rentals.
Absolutely, Julian. Thank you so much for the invitation today. As you said, my name is Rich Munroe. I'm with Diamond Edge Short-Term Rentals based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And our core business is short-term rentals. We've kind of made the mental shift about 3 years ago when we started with our tax lien business and looking at the cash flow opportunities. And we looked at the short-term rental model and compared it to the long-term rental model, and the light bulb went off for us. So we kind of sold anything that didn't fit short-term rentals, and we shifted gears. And so 100% of our business right now is short-term rentals.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that's very, very interesting tax lien. You got some other things going on, like a rehab business. You're in the management, a master lease model as well. So definitely want to talk about that. But can you take us back to when you first got started? 35 years now, you said you've been an entrepreneur full time in 2001. Can you take us back to, what originally got you on this path towards real estate and then eventually short-term rentals?
Sure, absolutely. So I started in business with consumer debt buying. So basically, debt becomes delinquent at the bank, and whether it's a credit card, auto debt, or a consumer loan, the banks don't usually want to fool with the delinquent portion. So there's a whole industry of companies that buy that debt from the banks and then put it through a collections process. So myself and another business partner, I started a business that did that, and we purchased about $4 billion in consumer debt and had a pretty successful legal network of attorneys that would go and do litigation collections on those accounts. Like most businesses in that space, unfortunately, during the recession, the banks stopped selling their debt. So it basically shut that whole industry down, or made it very difficult to acquire the same types of volume. And that's what gravitated us over to the tax lien industry. It's very similar because you're buying a debt or an asset as an investor. You have attorneys that do the servicing and the foreclosing and the quiet title action. So it was kind of a natural fit for me to shift over to that back in probably 2010 timeframe. And we ended up doing. We spent probably close to $7 to $8 million specifically on tax deeds in Georgia, and we also branched out into Maryland as well. And so it ended up being about 350 different properties that, for the most part, we sold to other investors. As you can imagine, at the point that it becomes a delinquent tax lien, it's usually a probate situation. The family doesn't want to deal with it, or it's a foreclosure. The people have walked away. So the property is usually in really bad shape, which was kind of gave me a full education on worst case scenario of how properties need to be rehabbed and what's involved with the analytics and pricing. And so, that was kind of our introduction to real estate. From there, we started doing rehabs, and we had a rehab business that we did multiple rehabs here in Georgia, as well as a partnership that we have in Chicago. And that's when we really started looking closely at the long-term rental model, comparing it to the short-term rental model, and kind of shifted gears from there. So right now, the only time that we do an acquisition for rehab is if the exit strategy is specific to short-term rentals.
So tax lien investing, can you kind of break that down a little bit more? From what it sounds like, with distressed properties, isn't this kind of what wholesalers are looking for? They're looking for these properties that are, people are kind of in distress, or they're maybe kind of delinquent, and then they take that property and they give it to, a person that's going to rehab that and try to make their profit. How does tax lien investing kind of fit in that real estate spectrum?
Right. So it's more along the lines on the latter part of the food chain where it's basically at the auction. So it's similar to acquiring a property as an investor from a foreclosure auction, right? So it's an auction format. Each county has a different timeline on when those properties are auctioned off. And you do a due diligence, you kind of review which properties you want to go after strategically, and you basically bid at auction to acquire those tax deeds. And that's really, how you acquire them. There's a redemption period, which means there's a period of time where the original owner or anyone that has a lien position can come back and redeem that tax deed from you with in Georgia, it's actually a 20% penalty. So right out of the gate, your exit strategy is either going to get a 20% return on your money, or you're going to be able to foreclose and take the property and sell it from there.
So is that what you would essentially do? You were hedging your bet, saying like, hey, it's kind of, maybe you already had a network in place that you could pass off these properties to. So were you essentially like a wholesaler at that point?
Yeah, it's kind of a slower burn though. It's not a 30, 45-day turn because of the redemption period and because of the time that it takes to get clean title. And so it's usually a year and a half to 2 years from start to finish, from the point you acquired at the auction to the point you do the sale. But because your cost basis is typically in much lower than what a wholesaler would be. You typically end up flipping it out to a wholesaler or an investor that's going to put the rehab into it and go from there.
So what's the difference from a wholesaler, going to these foreclosures and picking up these properties versus you going and picking up these properties?
So a wholesaler typically is not going to operate with dollars. So if you win a bid at $45,000 for a particular tax deed, you've got to pay that at the time of the auction. A wholesaler typically is going to try to lock something down under contract and try to reach out to their investor network and then put it under contract to flip it out within a 30, 45-day period. And usually they're not usually coming out of pocket to do that. So that's kind of the main difference. And that's why, a good analogy is like a traditional foreclosure auction. You'd have to stroke a check at the day of the auction to acquire that property, basically.
Are these tax lien properties not publicly marketed or sold, like you said, like with an auction?
Yeah, no, they are. They are definitely publicly auctioned. Each different county, each state has different regulations, but across the board, across the United States, this is done on a monthly basis. And from the government has to keep working, right? So they use those real estate property taxes to generate money to run the firehouse, to run the schools, and things like that. So if people don't pay, they give it's written in the statute that they have to sell it to investors to kind of keep the money flowing, right? And so that investor then inherits the rights of that, what the county does. And so it's basically a superior lien that wipes out the mortgage and wipes out any other lien. So it puts you in superior position, just like the county would be.
Got it. So you're basically putting yourself into the position where now you're paying the state and the owner of the property pays you, but these properties are in distressed position, so the people usually end up foreclosing on the property and giving it to you instead of giving it to the state.
That's correct. So, for example, in Georgia, it's a 12-month window that original owner has the ability to pay you back the investment plus 20%. And if they don't, then the property gets put through a foreclosure process.
And you get to keep the property since you're now the one that is holding the lien on the property.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay. Wow. I had no clue about tax lien investing, but I think I kind of understand it now. Very cool. That's a very interesting strategy. So you did that for how long?
7 or 8 years.
7 or 8 years. And you said you bought and sold around 400 properties. I mean, you have a lot of properties coming in, and going out. What kept you from just keeping all these properties, rehabbing them, or, turning these all into long-term rentals?
Well, it's an investment strategy because of the length of time that it takes. Typically, like I said, a year and a half to 2 years. Those investment dollars are dedicated to that strategy, and so you can't. There wasn't really an easy way to deviate from that. The whole starting point was to buy it, obviously at a good price and be able to sell it to another investor and let them deal with the rehabbing of it.
Got it. And out of those 400 that you bought and sold, about how many of those did you end up trying to keep yourself? I mean, basically, you get kind of the pick. You get to pick the litter and choose like which ones are the best deals, which ones are and I imagine that, at this point you get to kind of funnel away your investing strategy, whether you're going to wholesale it or, flip it or do, however it is. How would you kind of decide which ones to do for which?
Yeah, the vast majority of those got sold into other partnerships or other investment strategies, and got rehabbed and then turned into long-term rentals. And so the our kind of takeaway from that was that's when we started our rehab business and started more aggressively going after building up a traditional rental portfolio, by utilizing the things that we've learned in terms of how to evaluate a property, what the cost is to get it repaired, and then to get it cash flowing.
So to start this, the tax lien investing strategy, you would acquire all of these properties with the cash, but then you would, you know, funnel it out to different investors depending on which who would suit it for. But then you said, hey, why don't I eventually learn, why don't I start my own rehab business so I can start turning these into long-term rentals myself. And you were doing this for the investors or for yourself, like which way?
Yeah, so some of the properties, and this investment strategy actually lends itself well with self-directed IRAs. And so a good portion of the properties were done through my self-directed IRA, which kind of gave me the ability to make a much higher return than I normally would. And then the other part were other investors that kind of put money into the fund to invest into it.
What were some of the biggest risks involved with this tax lien investing strategy?
Well, the obvious, you basically, there are some cases where if you bid on the property and there's a structure standing, that a year goes by, that the property could have been demoed because it was already on the city list to be demoed and things like that. So there's some certain things you have to watch out for ahead of time. You have to assume that when you're going to the auction to bid the property, that you're going to end up owning it, right? So there's a lengthy due diligence process that's involved in the beginning. You have to basically put your eyes, or have someone put their eyes on the property before you confirm what you're going to bid on it. So you don't want to end up with paying 50 grand for something that you thought was a structure when it's really a land that was already demoed. So we did properties in Baltimore, Maryland, for example, and there's a lot of row homes there. So not only do you have to go and look at the front of the property, you got to go down the back alley, because in some cases the whole back and the roof of the back end of the row home may be exposed to the elements. And so you're not going to know that unless you actually physically go and have it. We had a little team that did a due diligence ahead of the auction to make sure that we knew what we were bidding on. So that's kind of a big part of the risk. Beyond that, the length of time that it takes in some cases to get through probate or to get through the quiet title action. If you're banking on 6 months, it could end up being 12 months in some cases, depending on what the situation is. So that's the other. You need some private money investment that's patient, that allows you to give you that flexibility in time.
And buying and selling 400 homes, did you ever have like any like really really bad deals, or it's just like, man, I bit off way more than I could chew, or did everything kind of go smoothly during that time?
No, I mean, we had, like I mentioned, the where you have the city that basically we had two properties that we didn't pay that much for it, but it was enough where it was probably 5 grand or so each property. And when we did our due diligence, there were homes there, and when it went time to do the redemption period and notify the original owner, we always go back and do another due diligence, and two of those properties got torn down, by the city. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that. You own the land instead of the structure with it. So we had a few occurrences of that. And then most of the time it was, you have homes that have in much distressed real estate that have had hoarders in there that have left everything. So we probably had a house that was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath we probably had about 5 different dumpsters worth of stuff that had to come out of there because stuff was packed to the ceiling. So there's those types of situations that you have to contend with. You can't show a house to sell it to an investor if they can't open the front door, right? So it's little things like that we have to deal with.
Did you get to inspect the properties? Because like with a foreclosure, typically it's going to be like sight on scene type of deal. With these tax lien properties, can you go into the property, check it out, or anything like that?
Yeah, technically you're not supposed to. You're not allowed to. You can basically look at it from the street, but you're not able to enter the property at all. So you do have to kind of make general assumptions based on worst case scenarios.
Was this your first kind of foray into real estate investing? Was just from tax lien investing?
No, we had a business in conjunction with our debt buying space that we did higher end foreclosures in the Atlanta market. So, you know, again, back on the foreclosure steps for regular foreclosures, it becomes very competitive anytime you're under 250,000 in purchase price, for example. But as you start going above that, 350, 400, you know, these are larger 800, $900,000 homes. There's not that many investors that have that as their sweet spot. So we invested in some higher end properties and was able to pick up a lot of those during the auction for you know what was owed on the mortgage, and so there was not a lot of competition. And you know, of course, it's bigger numbers. It's a $200,000 rehab, and you're buying it for 350, and then you're selling it for you know 850 or 900,000. So we did have a you know I had prior experience before the tax liens in that business.
So were you, I mean, that's a lot of cash, and probably for a lot of people that are, in the space, thinking like, I don't have that type of money to pick up 800, $900,000 places and then 200,000s of rehab. Like, did you have like were you doing like doing like syndications for these, or like, did you have just like a fund? Like, how did you acquire
So
these
we
properties?
we did we did similar to our tax lien business. We had individual partners that were basically silent investor partners that contributed to the investment and had kind of a preferred return with a profit share on it.
Do you recommend people that are, interested, they hear the strategy and they're like, yeah, I'd love to be able to take these properties and turn them into short-term rentals. Do you recommend for someone that maybe doesn't have a lot of experience in real estate, get started in like tax lien or foreclosure investing?
You know, it's a little bit of a longer curve. If your end game is short term rentals, there's other ways like rental arbitrage that you can get involved a lot quicker with less dollars needed up front, and you know, without jumping through the hoops of doing a rehab and all the things that come along with that. So you know, there's other things, there are other lower barriers to entry to get into this business besides doing that. Now, with that being said, there are definitely good opportunities to go after strategically with that in mind. You know, as far as the short-term rental model goes, to go and acquire a property, get it fixed up, and have that be kind of the you know the end strategy with it.
I mean, you were doing, pretty large sums of properties, 400 bought and sold, dealing with a lot, you have that background real estate experience and knowledge working with high end properties and, the tax lien properties. Are you still doing that today? Or then did you eventually stop focusing on that and switch completely towards short term?
Yeah, we've kind of wound our tax lien business down, so to speak. We haven't acquired any additional ones. The ones we do have some that are still liquidating that we're selling out, but we're not aggressively growing that business right now. We do our core focus is the short-term rental space at the moment, and kind of long-term strategically, we're looking to grow that business. You know, we've got 20 listings right now. We're probably going to be, even in this environment, we're seeing a lot of opportunities. So we're going to probably be double that size by the end of this year, and you know, that's kind of our long-term strategy with it, is to grow that business.
And why the switch? I mean, if you're pulling, pretty heavy numbers and you're able, you have the rehab business, you have, all these properties that you're able to see before, maybe even a lot of other, before it's even on the market. You would think that that would kind of be the upper edge. But what made you switch from, that whole strategy towards specifically just short term rentals?
Well, you know, it's like any real estate business, you've got to have infrastructure operations in place to be scalable. And, you know, to in the rehab space, there's a lot of players that are doing great in rehabs, and they put their systems in place, and they're doing 40, 50 a year, and they're clipping along. You know, we at our peak, we probably only did about 4 or 5 a year. And that was on purpose. I mean, there's all kinds of inherent risks that come along with that business, that if you don't have a good project manager in place and things like that, that you can very quickly start eating into your net profit. And so strategically, when we made the conscious decision to shift into short-term rentals, we built it scalable so that it could be easily added to, and you know, put the systems in place to accommodate that, again, with kind of the residual cash flow in mind. So, you know, you can go do 5 rehabs in a year and make pretty good money, but you know, when you don't show up to work that day to make sure the contractors are doing what they're doing, it's not going to happen, right? You're going to fall behind the curve. You're not going to be able to hit your numbers. So the short-term rental space, allows you to build something, put things in place that can run it, and you can basically put that thing on autopilot and run it remotely from anywhere in the world once you've got it up to a certain level. So that's why I kind of shifted over. Even with traditional rentals, and even we had a lot of property managers that managed our properties that weren't local to us, and was happy to pay them the 10% management fee to do so. But you're constantly dealing with having to evict somebody right before the holidays, rehabbing that property once you get them out of there, and so that $300 or $400 per month that you're clearing can very quickly turn to nothing after a year and a half to 2 years. So, and then plus it's not easily scalable, right? I mean, you have to get up to some pretty big numbers for it to be a profitable residual income. Whereas I don't have to tell you this, the short-term rental space, you're probably even if you're strictly looking at it from rental arbitrage or from a management standpoint, you're easily $1,200 to $1,800 per month per unit. And that for me, that it was simple math. When it's 2.5 to 3 times without all the additional headaches that you deal with, you still deal with headaches here. It's a hospitality business. You got to be on point. But if you have a process in place and put some things in place to manage that, you can definitely be very easily scalable to grow that business.
But Rich, there's probably a lot of people that are listening right now, and they say, "But what about the appreciation? Like, yeah, I want to purchase properties, and then I want to invest in them for the equity and the appreciation. You know, that's the benefit of owning these properties." What do you say about that? Because I mean, you were in the space of purchasing properties. You could have been focused on appreciation and equity and all of that, but you've pivoted from that to now it's more of a master lease, rental arbitrage model and management. Why is that?
Yeah, so I do have properties that we own that we do short-term rentals with as well, and I feel it's very important to have that diversity. So, we probably have more properties in our portfolio that are managed than anything else, and it gives us that flexibility. During COVID, for example, there were a lot of folks that were over leveraged that were basically covering expenses month to month or week to week. And when you have 60 to 90 days of cancellations, that's not something that you can handle easily. So, I think it's important to have diversification. Yes, property ownership is good, and to build that equity over time and is an important piece. But I don't think it's the only piece, right? So I do have that as a part of what we're doing, but it's not the main part.
Yeah, I think that's really key. And you kind of hit on one of the models that, or the concept that we try to educate people on, because a lot of people that come into the space and they think, I just want to do rental arbitrage, master lease investing. I just want to do management, or I just want to own property. But what you're saying is that blend, what we call the RCB model, which is like rental arbitrage, co-hosting, buy and hold, because each type of investing strategy has its own risk, its own risk tolerance to it. When you own these properties, like you said, you're putting in a lot of money into it in order to try to acquire them. Master lease investing, you don't, rental arbitrage, you don't have to put in a lot of money. But during times like this with COVID, it definitely, it's nice to have a smaller portfolio of those things that you do owe, and have those managed clients, because you don't owe them anything. I mean, it lowers your risk. So how were you personally impacted with COVID during that first wave, and how is that kind of impacting you now when we're kind of seeing the second wave in different areas?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like everyone else, we had, pretty much everybody canceled on us given the shutdown, international travel, all the events got canceled in March. And within a few weeks, though, it started picking back up. I also run a few local groups here in town of meetings with other folks that are doing short-term rentals, and we kind of share best practices. And so I was very much in tune with what was going on in the market. And we were all strategically looking at other alternatives, like most people were, cutting your costs where you can, looking at more 2-3 month rental corporate leasing strategies. Because at the end of the day, life still goes on, right? So we still had people that were going through divorces, relocating to Atlanta, that needed temporary housing. We still had insurance claims. The tree falls on the house needs to be repaired for 2 weeks. They need somewhere to stay. So we had fortunately, a lot of activity, even though pretty much the travel and conference business and business travels got completely shut down. And so, since then, obviously since some of the shutdowns have been started to be lifted, and even though now they're starting to be tightened up again, given the recent surge, we're seeing a lot of activity of the folks that have been pent up and want to get out within 2 or 3 hour drive of where they live and kind of do a staycation. So we're getting a lot of those types of visitors right now. So our occupancy has been pretty steady. It's been, usually a 5 to 7 day lead time though, instead of 30 to 45 days. So if you look further out in the calendar, it's still empty, but as we keep getting closer and closer, it keeps filling up so far. So, we've been pretty fortunate from occupancy standpoint that way.
You've been in the real estate space for quite a while, and you've seen these economic turns. You're there in 2001, you're there in the 2008, and I'm sure that there was some more in between, 2008 to 2020. But I mean, you've seen the market cycles, but you also have real estate experience. You've done the rehabs, you've done the other creative investing strategies. Are you still 100% short-term rental in the future, or do you think that different markets are better keen for other investing strategies?
Yeah, I think there's always different opportunities, and we're starting to shift a little bit, not necessarily away from short-term rentals, but more to multifamily and kind of assisting with driving out, the vacancy rates down there with new developers. Given the current market and given the high unemployment and the uncertainty, what we do is a good natural fit with large developers that are looking at putting in 20 units, 30 units, several hundred units, and being able to strategically work with them more on a master lease basis to basically firm up that occupancy for them. And so for us, a lot of our growth is coming from that type of situation, which doesn't mean we're moving away from short-term rentals. It's actually increasing that model and looking more intense and higher volume of it.
Hey, this is Julian, and I wanted to be able to give you our newest book, Airbnb Secrets Revealed: How to Build a Fortune on Airbnb Without Owning Property. In this book, we talk about the concepts of rental arbitrage investing as well as co-hosting and how you can build a business leveraging other people's properties. This book is perfect for the new short-term rental investor, and it's something that I wish that I had when I first started, as it would have saved me a lot of trouble and helped me to understand how to be able to leverage the power of short-term rental investing in your own real estate portfolio. If you'd like to get our newest book completely for free, go to shorttermsage.com/free book. Now, back to the show. But do you think that, because you have this experience with being able to acquire and fix properties up, do you look at this opportunity as a time for you to be able to, change up your strategy in as far as like fixing or acquiring? Or do you think that, doesn't matter what the market is, where you are, that short-term rentals through like master lease investing or management is the better or the preferred alternative?
Yeah, I mean, that's still going to be our core business. We do, and with the increased volume of distressed opportunities, we are looking at those. But we're not kind of shifting gears. We're still focused with the short-term rental models being the core business.
And the reason for that being what reason?
I mean, for me, it's we all have our core competencies, right? We all have things that are sweet spot, and so I think it's important to have that be your main line of business and have that be a critical focus. When you start deviating from that, especially in the rehab space, there's a lot of things that can distract you. So we just like to be disciplined and kind of keep with our original plan. That doesn't mean we're not going to look at the other opportunities and may not pursue some of them. We're just not going to, at least at this point in time, that my opinion may change on that given what happens in the market. But as of right now, that's kind of what we're doing.
So what you're kind of saying is like people in the rehab, flipping space, they have that shiny object syndrome that they kind of hop around to different investing strategies. Is that what you're saying? It's being focused on your particular niche?
I'm saying it takes a lot of infrastructure to support a successful, scalable rehab business, right? And so, even the guys that I know that are doing well are moving away from that because it tends to become a job. You've got to make sure that those projects are on point, and it doesn't give you the flexibility like we talked about earlier with residual income with the short-term rental space. It just does not give you that flexibility. And so, there's a lot of players that I know that have done well, and there's a reason they've done well. It's a lot of work, right? So it's something that you have to have that commitment for time and be able to do that.
How different is it from, traditional, real estate investing to, short-term rental investing and building a management company?
It's not much different because you still have the same things involved. You've got to have the right people in the right place doing the right things, right? So in any business, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. And so, it's all about process. It's all about systems, and making sure that your team is there. You can very quickly get one bad review in this business, and that listing's done. And to get one bad review, and we've been a super host since the beginning, but even with a lot of different reviews, that one review will still drag down your rating pretty quickly and put your superhost status at risk. And so you have one person that's fumbling, a cleaner that forgets the wings in the microwave, and the person checks in 3 days later, and just one little thing like that can make it bad hiccup. So everything has to be on point, and those operations have to be in place to make sure that you can be efficient and mitigate those risks.
What do you think is more competitive? Do you think that the traditional real estate investing, flipper, tax lien investing world is more competitive, or the short-term rental management and master lease models?
I think there's competition in any market. I don't know that they're directly comparable. It's just a little bit different, right? So you probably don't have as many short-term rental managers that are looking at the larger deals, and so you've got a little bit of less competition there, and that's probably going to change and has started changing over time. But the market's still maturing and fairly new, and so there's a little bit of a first mover's advantage there, I would say.
And you've been in this space for about 3 years now. Have you noticed a big shift in short-term rental investing 3 years ago to where it is now?
Yeah, we've like most short-term rental folks, you start off with the logical thought process of it's hard to go wrong with a studio or a one bedroom, right? And you're kind of wrapped up with similarities with the hotel industry, and that's kind of what we all have grown up on and what we know. When the reality is the larger homes, the 4 or 5 bedroom, 6 bedroom homes, from an occupancy and a revenue standpoint, do much better than one bedrooms. There's been a shift in the travel, where even business travelers will travel in groups and get a 5 bedroom home instead of getting 5 different hotel rooms. Just economically, it makes more sense. And you're still able to reap a pretty good premium on, 450 a night, for example, on a nice 5 bedroom home. And so from a rental arbitrage standpoint, obviously, a $3,000 or $4,000 lease is a lot more expensive than a $1,200 lease, but there's a reason for that. There's a bigger spread. There's more money to be made there. So now, given what's going on with COVID, there's been a little bit of a pause in that thought process. So a lot strategically, a lot of players are going back to that 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom mentality. And so we're seeing some of that. But I go back to, it's always productive and healthy to have diversification, right? So if you've got a combination of both of those, and we've also started looking at kind of the vacation rental, beachfront home rental model as well. We have a 2 bedroom condo down in Montego Bay in Jamaica, which obviously is sitting empty right now because of what's going on from a vacation international travel standpoint. But we feel that there's some definite advantages to including that as a part of the mix as well from a vacation rental standpoint.
Now, when you look at tools like AirDNA or even just like on Airbnb, when you start looking at those 3 bedrooms, 4, 5, 6, I mean, the quantity of those types of properties is a lot more limited. A lot of probably fear from investors looking at those types of properties and saying, like, that's a much higher rent, and that's a lot of, I need a big party to be able to fill that. when I travel, it's just usually like me and my wife. Like I don't know who's traveling in such large groups. How do you know that you're going to be able to, hit your occupancy, hit your revenue numbers, and still be able to profit?
Well, you don't. However, what you mentioned in the beginning of that sentence is there's not that many of them out there. So that plays to your advantage, right? So you've got a large family traveling into town for a wedding or a funeral or whatever the event is, and they need somewhere that sleeps 14 people. When they do that search on Airbnb or VRBO or any of the platforms, that property list is going to be pretty low for the options of sleeping 14 people in most markets, right? Unless you're in kind of some of the luxury high end areas. But so right out of the gate, uh, when you have folks that are looking for that amount of people that it sleeps, you're going to be able to get a higher occupancy rate. We have some strategies that involve getting townhouses together. So, we've got like two duplexes that are next door to each other. And you can do multiple listings where you have one listing that combines all of the units as one listing for that reason, to gain the eyes and the attraction of the folks that are looking for those large number of people that they can sleep. So, you know that I there has been a diminish or kind of a downcline since COVID, though, with the larger groups traveling at that for the obvious reasons. Albeit there are still some bookings that are occurring at that level, but I think long term strategically, the larger properties are going to still continue to do well.
But do you see them continuing to do well just because that there is less competition, or because there's more people traveling in groups?
There's more people traveling in groups, and whether it's like we've talked about business travelers, there's the once we start opening back up again, the basketball, baseball traveling teams. So you have a lot of families that are traveling together to with their kids to do that. So a lot of our larger homes have had a lot of bookings that way, that more than you would think, especially during the high season of when those tournaments are happening.
What is the profit that you're looking at for those larger size properties? When for, let's say, the Atlanta Georgia area is, there's a lot more people there. But what would be the typical return for, like, let's say a one bedroom or a two bedroom versus, let's say, a 5 or 6 bedroom?
Right. So on a one bedroom or a two bedroom, your net return is probably going to be in that 1,500 1,800 range. On the larger properties, the 5 bedroom homes, you're looking closer to 8 to 10,000, especially if it's some of the homes that you can have some of the pool tables or swimming pools. Some of the higher end luxury stuff. You could get closer to 15,000 on a net basis, on a monthly basis on those.
Net.
Mhm.
Holy cannoli. Rich, I think you just spilled the beans. I think people are going to go crazy now. That is wild. So there's just that lack of competition, and there's just that much need. Like, why wouldn't there be more people doing larger properties if those numbers are able to pull them?
Yeah, no, that's fair, Julian. People have been doing this. Like, VRBO, home away, vacation properties have been around for 20 years, right? So the 4 or 5 bedroom homes, families are going on vacation. Beachfront, that's been around forever. And so it's just another angle to that for local travel, for in town or even in the suburbs. It's and it's obviously still viable on the vacation level as well, right? So you've got 5 bedroom homes that are near the beach or near the lake or near some vacation resort, and families go and they're happy to spend 450, $500 a night to do that. So do the math on that, right? I mean, you're able to, and some of the higher end properties, you're at 1,000 to 2,000 a night. And so it doesn't take that many nights for you to be in some good situations. Now, it's just like anything else; it's a higher cost to get involved with those properties. And so, to the extent that you have vacancies that bring you down, then you've got the higher risk of having a bigger number to come up with as a part of your reserve.
What kept you from going that route? Because, like you said before, a lot of people, they start off, with the studios, the one bedrooms, and then, they either stick with that model and they just keep on growing, or, maybe they try some different things. What was some of your fears or the things that was stopping you from scaling sooner in the larger properties?
Well, I think just out of natural learning and experience, we kind of weeded through the 1 and 2 bedroom space to understand by location and by rental amount what are the most profitable. And so we spent some time and energy to do that. We probably had 8 or 9 properties that we did not renew the leases because they weren't profitable enough, right? So that's a learning experience that takes time to do. And so once we've gotten that kind of under our belt and we have a good understanding of the profitability margins on what makes a 1 and 2 bedroom rental arbitrage good and which doesn't, um, then we started looking at the 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes as to kind of learn that market because it is a different market.
And what were some of the things that you were afraid of before moving into that space? Did you see a lot of other people doing that, and you ran the numbers and said, that looks good, or was there something stopping you from taking that jump?
Well, I think it's when you start looking at the higher end properties, whether it's rental arbitrage or purchase acquisition, the numbers and the amount of opportunities start to get lower, right? So you have to be a lot more selective, and in having to be a lot more selective, it's going to take you a little bit longer to kind of get traction. And so that's you just have to kind of wade the waters a little bit slower in the larger property space to kind of get cranking with it.
And how does that personally affect you? Like, are you strategically trying to find like properties like those townhouses where you can combine the units to make it one listing, or detach them to make them separate? Or are you like, how do you handle just having like one single family home that isn't able to be detached when times like this come, or there's just maybe it's a low season and there's not as much demand? How do you handle that?
So it goes back to the diversification. We're looking at everything and anything that makes sense, whether it's the duplex play or multiple properties in one area, or if it's just a one-off single family home. It's got to stand on its own 2 feet, right? So we're not really focused on one angle or the other. And then we have 20 unit buildings that we're looking on taking 9 of the 20 units down, for example. So it's kind of all the above, and each opportunity gets reviewed and looked at on its own merit.
What has been the most challenging part of scaling your short-term rental business?
Well, it goes back to the operation, right? So, we learned a lot of things with what you would think is fairly simple with the laundry service, for example. So we've got a process in place that manages the laundry process a lot smoother than when we first started. And it goes back to the hospitality aspect. If you don't have your cleaners and the laundry getting done and put out with stains and things like that aren't high quality work, then it's going to get you into trouble quickly. So it's those kind of growing pains and learning pains that you have to constantly tweak, and we're still learning now. So there's still things that we're improving on, but it all comes down to that operation and systems, making sure that runs as smoothly as possible and gets you to that 5-star review status for Superhost status.
And is there anything that you're doing to help get those positive reviews? So Airbnb just recently came up with their new off-platform policy to try to control everybody to keep the conversations in the platform, which makes sense. But for a lot of operators, that means like not being able to get their direct bookings, or follow up with maybe reviews. How are you personally getting more of those 5-star reviews and able to keep your Superhost status?
Yeah, I think it's those three pieces. One of the main ones is the guest communication and being highly responsive. Doesn't matter what happens, but if you're there to respond to the guest, that's the key. And so, we pride ourselves on being very responsive. We probably have a less than 5 minute response time on any inquiry or any guest that's currently there. And so, whether the guest had something come up and there was the HVAC went down or something happened that we had to address, it always gets mentioned that, well, you know, Rich's team was so responsive. They were there to help us right away, blah, 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 no matter what the problem is. So, the key is the guest communication. You don't want to be sitting there for 2 hours and not responding back to somebody. That's kind of the key to this business.
From an operational standpoint, you've grown your management portfolio. Do you think what are your thoughts on scaling rental arbitrage master lease with management and owning? Are you trying to level that out, or do you think you can go heavy on all one? What's kind of your strategy with how you grow your portfolio?
Right. So whether we have a property that we own, or it's a property that we're managing for another investor, or it's one of our rental master lease properties, they are all operationally managed the exact same way, in the same funnel, the same pipeline, the same channel manager, the same guest communication process. So for us, it really doesn't matter where that source is coming from, or where that property is, how it's being managed. It's all going into the same pipeline and process. So once we go live with the listing and we throw it into the mix, it gets put into a part of the process. And we've even started providing standalone guest communication services now to some folks as an option, that they might still want to be able to manage the property, but want to have the 24/7 guest communications handled. So we offer that as a part of our management process now too, which again gets thrown right into the mix with everything else as far as the system goes.
And what are you doing to be able to scale? Because a lot of people, and they just kind of focus on one thing, you know, it's a lot probably simpler to be able to scale a rental arbitrage master lease model if that's all you're kind of focusing on, talking to landlords, trying to find those, but you're also growing the management side. How are you just kind of like picking them up as they come? Like, how do you grow your portfolio?
Right. So I am very much involved in the local community with real estate investors and short-term rental investors. So I'm a board member of STROAGA, which is a statewide association for legislative efforts for short-term rentals. And so, like I mentioned before, we used to do in-person monthly meetings. Now we're doing them as webinars. And so I'm very active with investors and very well known in the space. And anytime there's a question or somebody has a property that they're not sure about, they know that I'm there as a resource. And so, there's a lot of properties that we end up helping real estate investors that have done a great rehab, for example, and they're not able to sell the house quickly. So we can come in and, stage the property, get it listed, and get them generating some revenue in the meantime as a part of their toolkit. So, a lot of our management properties kind of come from that type of referral.
Do you see a lot of other managers in the space doing this? This is a niche within a niche for short-term rentals, and specifically managers or master lease investors. Do you see a lot of other people kind of doing that?
Yeah, there's several other folks, and because I am so in tune with the community, we all know each other. We all share best practices and talk about different things that are coming and changing in the market. And so it's good to be able to have friendly competition and be able to kind of share thoughts and ideas with them. So yeah, there are quite a few other players that are quite successful doing the same thing that our company does.
What is one house rule that has saved you before? Do you have anything that you've done since that 3 years ago that you're kind of doing differently now?
I think it's one key thing that we've started to do that's kind of been great. Information is power. And so the more that you can make decisions on the front end, especially with a large number of people that are brand new to the platform, and you don't have any reviews to go on. And, so we've engaged with a platform that specifically does guest verification and scoring. You guys have probably dealt with them too. They're called AutoHost. And so that is an additional tool that we've implemented probably a little over a year now. That's been great because it gives you that additional, piece of information to make your decisions on accepting somebody or turning them down for a booking request, and mitigating the risk of having to shut down a party that's been unauthorized, or having them go in there and do something they're not supposed to be doing. So that's been a kind of a tremendous savior, so to speak. You no longer are learning from having people come in and tear things up. You're able to kind of be very proactive and prevent that from even happening. And so that's kind of a key part that we've learned over the last 3 years.
And what would you do differently if you had to start from scratch?
Uh, I don't think there'd be much I would do differently because we started off from scratch with the thought process and the end game of being scalable. And, so we started off investing extra dollars to have those things in place. And, like, for example, today we probably have the capacity to handle 70 listings, but we only have 20, right? So there's a period of time where we're going to be spending more expenses on operating until we get to that level. And so that's just for us from the beginning has been an investment in the end game in mind to be able to, have that scalable model in play to be able to continue to grow and tweak it as we go, so to speak.
And if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's trying to start getting into short-term rental investing, what would that be? Do you having this experience in traditional real estate investing, creative real estate investing, rental arbitrage, master lease investing, and co-hosting management? Where do you think someone should start on this journey if they're interested in getting into the short-term rental space?
Right. So, definitely the rental arbitrage model is something that gets you started quickly, even if it's just one unit, even if it's just a room in your home or a basement, like you did, Julian, I believe. Right. So, it's an easy way to learn the business, and then from there decide strategically, which angle you want to go at to grow it. Um, but your earlier part of the question was, what are some things to look for and look out for, and it's same thing with any type of real estate investing. Be disciplined to the numbers, right? So instead of looking at a rehab budget and an ARV, you're looking at occupancy rates and nightly rates compared to your monthly lease amount. And stick to if you've got a particular target that you're going after, stick to that model. Don't deviate from it. It's, be disciplined because it only takes being off by a couple $100, and now you've done all this work on a rental arbitrage where you're not making any money on it. So it's very important that your numbers, you stay disciplined to those numbers, and that those numbers make sense as much that you can make sense of it in the beginning to kind of mitigate that risk.
And where do you see short-term rentals going in the future?
So I think I'm very optimistic. Obviously, we're all going through what we're going through now with this pandemic, and there's no certainty as far as what the future holds. What the things I do know though is that hotels have been struggling with keeping up with the social distance requirements, the cleaning requirements, where short-term rental operators have been able to enhance their process. I think it's a lot of us are charging more for the cleaning process, and rightfully so because it's taking longer. We're putting steps in place to kind of protect not only the guests but the cleaners as well. And so I think going forward, as things start to open up back up again, and a lot of these events get rescheduled, the hotel industry is going to really start to see less and less opportunity, and the short-term rental operators are going to start to see more and more. And the fact of the domestic travel being a big part of our business to begin with, I think it's something only like 10% international travel historically in the United States with short-term rentals. So that one dynamic continuing to be a big factor of people that are going to be traveling more locally now than getting on a plane and going across the country, I think is going to continue to grow that business.
And what's one question that you have for maybe someone that is at a similar size than you, or someone that's maybe at that next level? If you could ask them one question or one particular thing in your business, what would that be?
Well, like I mentioned before, we're always learning. So, as you grow, things change and adapt, and you have to, adapt with those changes. So, for somebody that's operating, probably twice as many listings as we are, what are some things and some challenges that you didn't know about before you got to that level? Is probably the question I would ask.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for taking the time to come on here. And if anybody does have any questions, I know that you mentioned a couple other Facebook groups for operators in the Atlanta area. What's the best way for them to be able to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our webinars that we've been doing and meetings will get announced on the Atlanta Short-Term Rental Investors page. It's a Facebook group, Atlanta Short-Term Rental Investors. I also have a Facebook group for Diamond Edge Short-Term Rentals. You can follow that page. And then I can be reached directly as well at 770-540-7638.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich. I'll include everything in the show notes as well if you want to be able to join any of those groups or anything else that we talked about in this episode. But until next time, Host Nation, keep on hosting.
Thanks, Julian.
Hope you hosts benefited from the show. If you found value, please go on over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let us know what you enjoy about the show. If you'd like to talk to hosts that have been featured in these episodes as well as the community, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation.